Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the Practicing Experiential Learning Conference hosted by CEL and SUSS. It's 2 p.m., so I suppose we can start now. We had about 300 people registered for this conference. As of now, we have 155. So I guess we don't have to wait for all 300 to turn up before we can start. My name is Chi-Han. I'll be the moderator for this webinar. Before I introduce the speakers, perhaps I can say something about the story behind this webinar. Well, it all started, we were thinking about running an experiential learning conference. We started off thinking that maybe we could have an international or regional conference. And then it just occurred to us that we don't really know very well about experiential learning as practiced in Singapore. So we thought, why not use this opportunity to get to know Singaporean practitioners, or at least practitioners based in Singapore, what the other institutions and private sectors are doing in the area of experiential learning. Of course, the pestilence struck, and instead of running the face-to-face conference this year, we decided, let's just reorganize this and perhaps have two separate events. That's how this Zoom webinar was conceived, right? So in the original conception of the conference, we did have a panel consisting of the 4 speakers we have here. And the topic was, as named, hitting the wall, because I was thinking about the various innovative ways that we could run experiential learning programs or courses, but we often face certain obstacles, be it institutional, pedagogical, and in this case, with COVID-19, bioorganic obstacle. Right? So we're always hitting the walls. And with the arrival of COVID-19, right, I thought it would be a good opportunity for this Zoom webinar to find out ways that we can deal with this bioorganic wall, right? Perhaps in the form of, perhaps some might consider an oxymoron, virtual experiential learning, right? So is it possible to run experiential learning in a virtual manner, right? It could be something that I guess this arrival of the pandemic, it could be something that triggers certain creative ways of overcoming certain assumptions that we used to have, that experiential learning must necessarily be unmediated, right? Regardless of whether it's mediated by text, images, or in this case, technology, right? So so we thought, maybe get speakers from various backgrounds, from both public institutions and the private sector, to talk about whether it's possible to run experiential learning in a virtual manner. What are some of the obstacles that we face? And perhaps through this discussion that would carry on next year during the proper experiential learning conference, which I hope all speakers will join us again, that something could come out of this, right? Even though the pandemic should be over by then, perhaps virtual experiential learning ways of a pedagogy, right, could continue to be to form an essential part of our pedagogical approach, right? So let me introduce the speakers today. The biography has been uploaded onto the website. So if you want to know the details of the speakers, you can go to our conference website, take a look. So perhaps I'll just say a little bit about who our speakers are. So we're going to start with Dr. Carl Grundy-Waugh. Is that how I pronounce the name?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, great. All right. So we're going to start with Carl, followed by Ms. Chan Yuan Lee, followed by Professor Yaacob Ibrahim, followed by Dr. Dan Enghan. Right, let's start with Carl's biography. Right, according to his LinkedIn profile, right, he's a political geographer. Am I right? A political geographer. All right.
That's correct.
Yeah. So Carl has been in Singapore for decades, and he does a lot of field education in Southeast Asia. So later on, we'll hear from him, and he'll show us a nice video that he took during one of his field trips. We'll hear from him about digitally enhanced experiential learning. I think it's particularly challenging for people like Carl because he does a lot of field-based research, very anthropological, ethnographic research. And it's mind-boggling whether such situated circumstantial forms of learning can actually be turned virtual, right? So after Carl will be followed by Ms. Tan Yuan Li. So Yuan Li is a founder of a Nomad Adventure, right? So she's been running these adventure camps in Gopeng in Perak, right? So she runs courses in rock climbing, whitewater rafting, and adventure racing. She's also been an environmental activist and an outdoor educator for the last 30 years. So Yuan Li will be talking about the possibility of a virtual outdoor adventure. That's also another mind-boggling one. Is it possible to learn physical skills in a virtual manner? Right, so let's hear from her later again. Yuan Li, I might like to remind you that during our previous Zoom meeting with Carl and you mentioned that there's a difference between data and experience. I hope you can talk about that again, right? That was a very enlightening piece of information, right? So after Yuan Li is done, we'll followed by Professor Yaacob Ibrahim. I think most of us know who Prof. Yaacob is, right? So I don't have to say too much, but perhaps some of us do not know that he's currently a professor of engineering at SIT and also the advisor to the president of SIT. And what I learned during our last Zoom meeting with him is that he's going into service learning. Am I right? Yeah, something very interesting and perhaps quite diverse from his original training in engineering. And finally, we have Dr. Dan Enghan. Dr. Tan is the he had an accountancy. He received an accountancy degree from NTU and MBA from the UK and the DBA from Australia. He's currently the regional director and country manager for ACT Incorporated, which is a global assessment and learning company that's headquartered in the US. So as you read his biography, he spent many years in China, and he's going to talk about virtual internship to China, if I'm not wrong, right? So Dr. Yaacob Ibrahim, he will talk about virtual work-study program, right? So we have a nice mix of different experiential learning modalities, right? From Carl's field-based education to Yuan Li's outdoor adventure to Professor Yaacob's work-study program and Enghan's virtual internships, right? Now, before we start, I'd just like to describe briefly how today's seminar will run. So, so after my introduction, so Carl will go first, and after all the speakers have done, they have 10 minutes each. So after the speakers have completed the presentation, right, we'll have 40 minutes of Q&A. For the attendees, you can see in your Zoom interface, there's a Q&A button. So you can ask, you can type in your questions there, right? And you also have the option of upvoting the questions. So what I'll do as the moderator, I'll look at those questions that have been most upvoted. The panelists, the speakers can also see your questions. So if the speakers see anything that is particularly interesting to you or that's directed to you, you can just answer the questions. Okay. So Carl, are you ready to go?
Okay, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, I will try to. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, if there is any background noise, it will be renovation work that's being done in a nearby apartment. So, well, I'll just speak a bit louder.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, right.
And if that starts up, I'm going to try and share my screen. Okay, so I'm going to share the computer sound and optimize the screen. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Okay, good. So let me begin. Thank you very much to the organizers. It's really a great pleasure to be part of this panel. I can learn a lot, I'm sure, from the other panelists and also from the audience too and their questions. So I'm looking forward to this. The experiential learning in our time now, of course, is more socially distanced than these images. These were taken in Cambodia last September when we had a field investigation. one of many field investigations we've had over the years. And they're usually interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary, collaborative affairs, and they bring young people together in the region. And I think they're very, very big learning experiences because of the experiential nature of these field courses, because they're field courses involving projects and problem-based inquiry. This is my favorite photo with these wonderful pomelo from an island called Gor Trung in the middle of the Mekong River. It's a really splendid island if you ever want to go there. Anyway, I want to start out with case one. Now, everybody here might be interested in knowing about the experiential learning cycle, and there are many adaptations to the experiential learning cycle in engineering, in medicine, in real estate, all sorts of applications. But we use it in our field courses. So it's basically concrete experiences, reflective observations, abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation. Now, I have here a life cycle. It's a very different cycle to Kolb's learning cycle. And I just want to talk about case one, which is one I'm talking, one to illustrate our experiential learning, and then perhaps how digitizing this and digital learning can feed in. This is a real life cycle. This is the fella here, Opistorchus vivarini sensu latu. It's a liver fluke. For many years, I've been doing research on this liver fluke with a multidisciplinary team in Northeast Thailand. And here you see the life cycle, the eggs, and the eggs go into a little tiny Bithynia snails. Then they form free-floating cercaria. They attach themselves to the flesh and the fins and the body of the fishes. These are cyprinid freshwater fish, commonly eaten by dogs, cats, and humans. And the thing about this life cycle is, there are many parasitic life cycles. But this is actually a serious health problem because people get infected with the worm, with the parasite. And if they are infected for many years, it can lead to very debilitating problems for the liver and for other organs of the body, but it also can lead to a fatal bile duct cancer called cholangiocarcinoma. So we get students working together from medical faculty, public health, from social sciences, from geography, working on different problems associated with the life cycle. So we call it learning about the region through the study of a parasite, linking geography to medical science, public health, ecology, and social science investigations. This is a more simple diagram, which I like, and it's thanks to Professor Wang Yichen, my colleague who I work with from a publication in EcoHealth. It's a simplified version, less rude, because you don't have the fellow defecating. The defecation, by the way, is very important because that means that the life cycle can continue because hygiene, sanitation issues in the region, of course, are not always as pristine as they are in Singapore. So this is a problem. So I want to just use this simple diagram to show some of the different kinds of experiential work and learning that students can do, but also to say that a lot of this is digitized already on the basis of what we've done in the past, and it can be used for very interactive class-based learning. So landscape issues, humans transform the landscape all the time, irrigation ditches and dikes, pipes, reservoirs, can all change the conditions of the life cycle of the parasite. And so we have people studying landscape and built infrastructures and engineering works in relation to the life cycle. Then you have the ecosystem and the wetlands, and also the way in which humans have modified through paddy fields and things like that. Every farmer in the region sometimes does fishing, and they often fish in their own paddy fields. And then finally you have the cultural way of life, people's food cultures. And in the region, many people enjoy raw fish, semi-cooked fish, and also fermented fish. And so if you've ever had somtam or papaya or mango salad, you could have consumed fermented fish. You might want to check out for Opistorchis vivarini parasites. But this is an interesting life cycle. And one of the things we're trying to do is to actually show different aspects of the ecology and way of life, the fishing. These are commonly called cyprinid fish. This is a photo I took of a man making a dish called goipla, which is a raw chopped up fish, one of these fellas. And you had lime juice, you had chili, you had herbs, you had ants' eggs. And it's a very crunchy, tasty, delicious meal, but it can be riddled with parasites if you're unlucky. Food sharing in the region is also very common, and very often there'll be some fermented food in these dishes. And then this is a picture of one of the doctors from Konkan University Medical Faculty doing ultrasound testing in an outreach in the village to test for the parasite. And that's a picture of goipla. So we get students doing field-based learning and field-based work. They live in the villages for a period of time, and they also work with host researchers. And this was a focus group discussion where we discovered that in one of the villages, many of the local people, in spite of the ongoing public health programs, didn't know what the causes were of the parasite that causes the cancer. So they were saying raw crabs, raw shrimp, raw beef, raw vegetables, not washing your hands, not wearing your boots properly in the field. But these are all wrong answers. So actually our students learn from this whole interactive experiential learning experience. You can share these experiences online, and it becomes a very valuable tool if you mount these issues digitally. The second example I want to talk about are rivers as the blood vessels of life. This is a picture of Cambodia. We deliberately put in the rivers as in red, as blood vessels, as arteries. And this is where we've done a lot of work around the Tonle Sap and along the Mekong River, and also tributary rivers. And here we want to sort of create a digital archive that other people can work from. Of course, the students to create that digital archive have already used a lot of digital devices in creating the material. How may we using digital materials enable further rounds of experiential learning in class? Well, one is we create a kind of an archive of the full cultural and physical landscapes over time. Secondly, podcast videos can be used alongside simulation models to create virtual field sites for field-based learning in situ. And finally, digital material can also foster further educational collaborations online with scientists, with practitioners, with people interested in the particular problems that we're looking at, such as, you know, what's going to happen to the wetlands and floodplains of the Mekong Basin, for instance, with developmental changes, long-run environmental changes, and climate change. And what is the future of the people who live there? And so we're interested in the temporality across seasons of water level changes, and all this can be digitized, okay? And this is an advert for our riverwetlands.org site. Do I have time to share this? Quick video?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Okay. About the hydrosocial linkages along these arteries, these rivers, and the main stem, the Mekong, going all the way to the Tonle Sap and down to the Mekong Delta. And the project involves us meeting many different communities and understanding about the geographies and way of life
along these magnificent rivers. And the key thing is to bring students so that they can collaborate together and embark on experiential learning.
If you're interested to find out more, visit riverwetlands.org.
បើសិនបើអ្នកមានចំណាប់អារម្មណ៍ចង់ទស្សនាជាមួយនឹងតំបន់ដីសើម please
click below now.
Okay, thank you. I am now having a bit of problem getting this off the screen. So this is a slight technical issue that I have. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Hi, Carl, you can just stop share.
Okay,
you
I'll just stop share, yeah.
Yes,
okay.
that would be great.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for trying to squeeze so much into a very short presentation. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much, Carl. It's interesting that by studying a parasite, you can understand the region, right? Perhaps by studying the coronavirus, that single bioorganism, we can understand the culture of every single country that has been trying to deal with it, right? So next up, we have Ms. Chan Yuanli. Yuanli, are you ready?
Yes, I finally managed to mute myself.
Okay, all right. Let's rock and roll then.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I realized that, and to SUSS for putting together this incredible panel. I realized that I'm the panelist without a doctor or professor in front of my name. So I think I'm one of the people that, that perhaps in some, that I could possibly be one of a subject of Dr. Carl's studies, because I'm one of those people who make my money and make my living from a river. You know, our camp in adventure camp in Gopeng, we make our money from whitewater rafting. You know, for the last 15 years that for the last almost 20 years that we've been in the area, we've really turned my life for the last 20 years. My life has been about building up this adventure tourism activities in the town of Gopeng. Gopeng is in Malaysia for people who are not quite aware. In the late 19th century, Gopeng was a thriving tin mining town, and it was actually the capital of Perak, the capital of the state before Ipoh. It was where there was a lot of tin mining. There was a lot of wealth in the area, and a lot of migration to the area. And since the 80s, the town and the whole state has pretty much been in decline. It's been in economic decline, since 2000, we have been actually developing the adventure tourism aspect of Gopeng. I do lead my day-to-day is a very physical day. We're out, running trips, we're out, managing the business, cleaning life jackets, doing all of that. I am actually currently not in Gopeng. I'm actually currently in the United States. So if people have seen my videos or my introductory videos, that is currently, I'm currently in the United States, where I am, taking shelter, where I'm here for the pandemic and, kind of sheltering from from things here in here. And so I live by the coast in the United States. I live in Louisiana, and here I also live by the seaside. My life here is pretty much about fishing and living off the land here. That's what I've been doing since the pandemic began. I think tonight was the first time since the pandemic began that we actually ate beef that we bought from a shop. Otherwise, all the, apart from all the staples, apart from carbohydrates, pretty much everything that we've been eating since since March has been stuff that we've either hunted or fished or cultivated over here. So, so that's been my life for the last, few months and few years. So it was very interesting to be kind of brought into this to this panel and talk about the whole thing about experiential learning, and to think about, is it possible to actually transform experiential learning into a virtual platform? And of course, me coming from a very physical and where everything is about really doing things physically with your hands and kind of being involved in that life. It was like, wow, really? Seriously? How can you live virtually? How is it possible to transform experience, to convey all that experience means on a virtual platform? And kind of prior to this webinar tonight, I had a great discussion with Dr. Lim and Dr. Carl, and we were talking about it, and they was like, they were talking about how experience is kind of, during the pandemic, how experience has been kind of been conveyed to their students, and it, being, very diligent academics. They were talking about like, yeah, how do you measure this experience? How do you quantify it? And how do you define it? And, they were going on in talking, using all these ways to describe experience. And I blurted out, like, wait a minute, experience is not data. How can you treat experience as data, right? And then there was this moment like, we all kind of stood there like, oh, what does this mean? And I think, there is it's important for us to think about experience in that way. Sorry, my screen is doing weird. Oh dear, something. Here I'd like to offer this thought and this idea. There is something called the DIWK hierarchy, right? Where you have data, and data exists all around us, right? And we experience the world, and we experience the world. There's data, You're a rafting guide, you go out, okay, the river, there's the river here, the water level is at 3,000 CFS, the water is at 40 degrees temperature, the sun is shining. All that is data, right? And data exists around us all the time. And but when I think we begin to start processing data, when we start to recognize data, when data makes an impact on us, and in other words, when we start to contextualize that data, then that data becomes information, right? Oh yeah, the water is at 3,000 CFS, therefore it means that it's almost flood level, not quite flood level. So that's information, right? And when you begin to contextualize it, then that the difference between data and information is that, I think, in my opinion, information is useful. It's been processed, and you can start using information. Data is neutral; it just exists. And then the next level of that hierarchy is that once you if you can contextualize all that information, and when you contextualize data, you get information. But when information is viewed as a body, when many people start looking at information, then it becomes knowledge, right? It becomes knowledge that raft guides can pass on to each other. You see that stone there? When the water covers that stone, then the water is dangerous, right? Then that's knowledge that community holds, that those people hold to be true, and they can utilize at a more communal level. Knowledge is also technology, right? When we can start utilizing it in as a society or as a group of people. And then the next level of that information, so that from knowledge, I think we can start. Information, if we can apply it, it becomes knowledge. But I think when we can apply that knowledge, maybe predictively, then knowledge becomes wisdom, right? And I think it's very. When this DIWK hierarchy was first introduced to me, almost it really made sense to me. It really made sense to me that what we're trying to do is we're trying to that there's these different levels of there's a different hierarchy, right? And we take data and we process it to become knowledge. We contextualize it to become information. When we can apply it as a group, it becomes knowledge. and we can start applying it predictively, it becomes wisdom. And that became a very important understanding for me when I, as an outdoor educator. And another way for us to look at this DIWK hierarchy is that, you know, at first you know nothing, right? You start with know nothing. And then the next level is you know what. And then the next level is you know how. And then finally at the top of it is you know why. So, you know, going from know nothing to know what is the answer? And then, you know, how do I get it? How do I make that happen? How do I create that? And then finally at the very top of that level is I know why. And I think that you know, the other hierarchy, because when we talk about hierarchies, is of course Maslow's, and at the top of that, you know, that knowing why is part of that whole self-actualization. And you know, to know why, I think the why isn't an academic answer. That why is really a heart answer. And I think, you know, part of the whole process of this whole challenge of the pandemic that we've been living through is really, you know, I think people have started to talk about the whole concept of ikigai, of knowing our purpose. And so that's the why, right? That's the why. And, you know, for all the Zoomers and all the millennials out there, you know, go and Google ikigai, go and look at that picture. And it makes sense, right? So once we know why, you know, I think that we understand our purpose. And so to me, the whole, to sum up, you know, why, you know, I think experience is not data. Experience is not a level, right? A level on a hierarchy. Experience is not a destination. Experience is the journey. And I think, you know, when I think of that hierarchy, it's really about how do we move ourselves from taking data and making it into information that we can use, make it into knowledge that we can share, and make it into wisdom that we can apply. And to me, that's the whole package of what experiential education is about. And so that's where I'm at. So there we go.
All right, thank you very much, Yendi. I think the mention of context reminded me of this saying in anthropology that nothing has meaning unless they're embedded in context, right? And they change over context. So I think one of the questions that I thought of during your presentation was perhaps someone can answer later on whether it's possible to digitize context. I think that's something that Carl will probably be interested in as well. All right, so next we have Professor Yaacob Ibrahim. All right, he's going to talk about virtual or online work study programs. All right, Prof. Yaacob, are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you very much.
All right, let's rock and roll.
All right, thank you, Jihan, and thank you very much to SUSS for inviting me to this, I thought, a very interesting topic. I must apologize, I'm old school. I still have pen and paper. Perhaps I can keep the best part for my presentation for next year's conference. But let me begin by giving a sort of a backdrop of what we do in SIT, and I think it's important because that's the context setting. As you know, the key pedagogy for the Singapore Institute of Technology is the concept of applied learning. We were established in 2009 as a formal university and as the University of Applied Learning. And the concept of applied learning is very critical to what we do in SIT, and it is weaved in every aspect of the student's learning journey. And the idea is for us to be able to equip our students with industry relevant skills for a specific profession. They will be given the opportunity to interact and work with industry professionals. So that interaction with the industry is very important for us. So that's where the applied learning comes in. But at the center of our applied learning pedagogy is our integrated work study program. This is the so-called the jewel of SIT's applied learning pedagogy. The Iwsp is a compulsory program. It's a very distinctive feature of our academic program, and it is a key part of our work study continuum, where we want to develop what we call industry-ready graduates. The details are as follows. Our students have to spend about 6 to 12 months of relevant work in the industry within the course of their study. We have an entire center called the Center for Career Readiness, looking into opportunities in industry for our students, and they are paid during this period of time. As I mentioned earlier, it is compulsory for all students. But for every cluster, by the way, we're not organized in departments, but by clusters. They are unique and sort of distinct sort of IWSP programs, because every cluster have their own focus in terms of the industry needs. And the most important thing for us, the benefits of the IWSP, is allow our students to integrate theory and practice, and more importantly, develop deep specialist skills in their chosen field. And at the same time, it helps our students to understand the challenges facing in the industry, and especially during this period. In terms of the personal development, we hope to help our students to develop skills of adaptability, creativity, and innovation. And one very important benefit of this program is that it can lead to potential employment for our students. In fact, very often our students do well in the IWSP, that the companies hire them after they graduate. In fact, the feedback that we have received is that companies feel that the period is too short. Right? Nonetheless, during the journey for the 6 to 12 months, they are not alone. They are mentors. We have a team of professional officers that we have created to basically guide and help our students, so that every learning opportunity that they come across in a workplace can be successfully integrated into their learning journey. So that's the first part that we do, called the Integrated Work Study Program. It is expanding as our student population expand, and I know my CRC is working very hard to get new opportunities, and I applaud the work they have done so far. The next piece of our experiential learning is the idea of social context, something that was mentioned earlier by the earlier panelists. We felt that it is important for us to bring in the real world context into the students' learning journey, and we do so by integrating what we call social context in our academic program. In fact, we have a requirement that every SIT cluster must have every academic program must have one module where social context elements is integrated, and every student must go through at least one module. We have left this to the faculties and the staff to decide. There are 4 options. I won't go into the details, but the most important thing is that they have to decide what is most appropriate for their discipline. So I'm familiar with the engineering context. I participated in some of their classes where students are exposed to some of the national challenges that we face as a nation, and how engineers play a very important role in society. So that's social context. Now, and of course, the other thing that we do have, which I think other IHLs also have, is that we have a whole range of volunteering opportunities for our students in the non-academic arena. We have a department called Student Life, who has done a great job in creating opportunities for our students to volunteer in the community. As you all know, the program in SIT is very tight. We do 2 to 3 academic program. We are trimester, so the time left for our students to do non-academic work is very, not significant. But yet within those periods, I think our Student Life has worked very well with our students to ensure that whatever volunteering opportunities they have, there's value to them. And I think they go through a whole series of training so that they can go out and do meaningful work. So that is sort of volunteer work. We now at SIT want to take this one step further and to incorporate service learning elements in our students' experience. Now, we know that sometimes students may not just want to do one-off, and they want to do something a lot more deeper. And so we've decided now to introduce service learning elements into some of the work that they do in the community. It is not compulsory, and every student can decide on the length of time, and they can do it within their 3-year or 2-year academic program. They can do it during their vacation period. They can do it as part of the IWSP or the capstone requirement. But the most important thing I want to emphasize is that it's not one-off, it's not ad hoc, and it has to be integrated and contextualized as part of the academic program. So for our colleagues from SUSS who were with me in Hong Kong, we went for the conference, we saw the value of service learning, where the students go out using the knowledge they have gained from the classroom to solve a particular problem. It could be social problems, it could be other types of problems. And so this is something that we want to do in SIT. And in fact, the university has approved the setting up of a center in SIT dedicated to doing this work. Yet at the same time, we are collaborative in the way we do these things. We are also working with 2 other centers, or among the many centers that we have in SIT, but I want to mention 2 because I think they're very important. We've recently set up the National Center of Excellence for Workplace Learning. As you know, that workplace learning is something in which there's a lot of emphasis, and my own president, Prof. Tan Tiam Soon, pays a lot of attention to this because he believes this is the next revolution in learning, workplace learning. And when there are projects that take place in the workplace, there's something in which we can do together with this particular center, we work with them. I have another group of colleagues in SIT called the Applied Research and Innovation and Enterprise Group. They are the industry-facing group. They work with the industry. And where some of these projects have industry collaborations, we will work with them. So that is just a snapshot of what we try to do in terms of increasing the opportunities for experiential learning. Because as I mentioned earlier, what underpins our pedagogy is applied learning. Now, the reason for today's discussion is, you know, with COVID-19, what have we done differently, basically? Obviously, pre-COVID, we had a lot of work that we have done and our students have done well. When COVID came, we had to make some adjustments. So for some of the Iwsp programs, we are in a way directed by the companies. It is the companies that will determine how the interaction will take place. But there's one particular program that I thought is worth mentioning. This is the Health and Social Sciences cluster. This is a cluster that trains allied health professionals. We have a variety of programs that they do there, from physiotherapy, diagnostic radiography, and so on and so forth. But as you know, the nature of this training is hands-on. You have to be able to go to the clinic, go to the hospital, and deal with the patients. During the circuit breaker period, you can't do that. So to the credit of my colleagues in HSS, they invested heavily in AR and VR, not as a replacement, but as a way to help to prepare our students. And we know that we can't do everything online, but eventually with the online training, the students at least have a head start. When they go for their clinical placement, they know what is going on. It is not perfect, but it's something which we need to do, especially during this COVID period. So I have a bunch of slides that they gave me. I don't want to share it today, but maybe for next year's conference. But I think they have done well to sort of react and find a way out using technology. But we know that it will never replace the clinical placement, because it's important for them to go to the field. Now, what are the next steps? Now, Iwsp will remain in SIT, I can tell you that. But now, we are now looking at how we must be prepared for the next pandemic. When the next pandemic comes, what do we do? Because we owe it to our students to make sure that their learning journey is maximized. So the HSS cluster has been doing this for a long time, and they have done well. I know for a fact that all the clusters are looking at how we can prepare for the next pandemic. How do we make sure our student experience is maximized? Let me just conclude by sharing a few points. As I mentioned earlier, Iwsp will remain, Experiential will remain. But when interactions are inhibited, we need to look at technology. Technology offers some solutions, AR and VR, but it's not everything. And we've learned from our experience that there's no one-size-fits-all. Online experience for ICT students is different from online students for HSS, definitely, basically, right? And so what we want to do is to find the right balance between online and basically face-to-face, because at the end of the day, nothing can replace the face-to-face interaction. Even for our HSS students, when finally the circuit breaker was relaxed, we basically prioritize clinical placement, so that at the end of the day, the students go directly to the clinics and start their work rather than doing the observational part. So all our clusters in SIT are now looking at what are the fallback plans and how do we put this in place, because we can never prevent, we know that there will be another pandemic around the corner, and how do we ensure that the experiential learning, which is central to what we do in SIT, is continue to maximize for our students' learning journey. So those are my short points to discuss, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Yaacob. Next up, we have Dr. Dan Enghan. He will talk about virtual internships. Enghan, you ready to go?
Yes, Dr. Lim. Let me pull out my slides. Can you see my slides, Dr. Lim?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, SUSS, for inviting me into this panel discussion. Just now, as Dr. Lim has mentioned, he introduced me as with my so-called day job at ACT, where I've been working in China for the last 20 over years. But today, I actually come to this panel humbly as a as a founder of this organization, which I started 3 years ago, called OSG Youth Alliance, as you can see in this slide. And OSG is a social enterprise I set up in Singapore 3 years ago to develop Singapore youth so that they can be more global-minded, enterprising, and resilient. And we really focus between China and Singapore. We really want our Singapore youth to really understand and be inspired to actually enjoy the high growth of the China economy. And we really feel that the more of our Singapore youth understand about China, the more they aspire to have a career or a startup in China, the better it is for both China and Singapore. So what we do is that most of our leaderships are in China. We have a leadership team of 10, where most of them are in Shanghai, Beijing, Hangzhou, and Shenzhen, as well as Singapore. And over the last 3 years, we have held more than 100 events dedicated to youth. We have about 2,000 youth enjoying our so-called events. And we look into things like expert talks, youth business competition, study tours, mentoring program, as well as internship, which is the topic of today's discussion for me. And on the internship side, we actually had relationship with some local universities in Singapore and polytechnics as well, whereby we as residents of China, we enrich the China internship experience for these kids, for this youth who has internship in China. So over the last 1.5 years, I've had the so-called the privilege of working very closely with Singapore youth in China where they are doing internship, and really want them to experience more than just an internship. We want them to experience the networking, the culture, as well as the entire business community within the China cities. So today's actually is more about how we actually do this and how are we going to face in the midst of our pandemic and not able to travel to China to do all this. So actually for us, the OSG's current one of our key project is actually internship and for us, we really want to enrich overseas Singapore interns in the experience in China. So we have worked with hundreds of Singapore interns who have been in China from NTU, NUS, Nanyang Poly, and various other polys as well. And they have been there for half a year to 1 year. So OSG actually do our part to really reach out to them, get them to be more immersed into the local culture, and get them to be all outwards into network experience and able to organize themselves so that they are entrenched into the business and cultural aspects of different cities in China. And also now, because of the pandemic over the last many months, it makes us really think about how can we fundamentally change the whole concept of internship so that it can be done with effectively and with high efficacy on a virtual basis. So today's topic, I just want to share with you some of the findings that I have or some of the things that we have been doing. And hopefully there's a lot of sharing today. We'll be able to see, how can we do better. As you can see here, I have sort of try to put down the kind of objective where an overseas internship should embed. So you can see here, I have put down 6 of the kind of objective. Cross-cultural understanding under A, things like meeting academic requirements from the University of Polytechnics that they have set for them, that's under B. Enlarge personal and professional network, that's under C. And under D is meeting work expectations from the supervisors in the company that they are attached to. And livelihood issues like finding an apartment to stay, getting themselves, get all the things like cell phone and looking for places to eat and things like this, getting the neighborhood, understand the neighborhood. And finally, we talk about leading and participating in some social events. So I felt that for a successful internship or some experience, a student should actually have all the 6 elements or more. Okay, these are the main what I have been focusing on. And most of the time over the last 3 years when I met with many of these program managers of universities as well as interns themselves, the A, B, D, E are being done relatively well. I give credit to a lot of the program managers in the universities in Singapore who actually, make sure that these are the 4 areas that is taken care of. And OSG, for me, I felt that A, B, D, E is not enough. So that's why OSG comes in to propose to this university that we, on the ground, support would like to do C and F, which is enlarging their personal and professional network, and encouraging them to lead and participate in social events locally. So this is what we have been doing over the last 1.5 to 2 years, where we have relationship with many of these universities and polytechnics in China. And the C and F portion are actually not done simply by the OSG team. We have a big group of people, Singaporeans who have been in China for many years. They themselves support us in reaching out to them to get them to be a mentor, to get them to be experts, advisor, even to able to guide them on the different specific industries knowledge, so that there's a sharing of information among the students, the interns, as well as the professionals who are there in China, the Singaporean community at large. And even recently, we have reached out to Malaysian students in China who are also interested, to enlarge their personal network as well as to participate in some social events. So this has been going on for the last 1.5 to 2 years, and we anticipate that it will continue to be valid. But the fact is that currently there is this issue about this pandemic where traveling is not possible. But it actually, to me, is like I felt that the pandemic has been a trigger point for a deeper problem. There are 2 aspects of the problem which I meant. Okay, one aspect is I mentioned before. Many of the internships, even when students are going over to China, they do not actually have a guidance on how to do the C and F, the enlargement of personal relationship, networking, as well as participate in other social events outside their work. So this has been a problem where, because the universities and polytechnic have limited local ground support to do this, to enrich the students' experience. But the number 2 is that overseas internship has been very expensive. Because the students will be there for a few months to a year, and they have to, bear the cost of air tickets, accommodation, all these things. And some of the interns don't get paid very well. So again, the financial aspects has deterred many students from going to China to do internship, which is, again, I felt that it is a shame, because we should encourage more of this to be there. So the concept about the virtual internship might actually be a possibility. So me and my team sit down and realize that, obviously, it has always been an issue that we want to address, but the pandemic has actually hastened this particular discussion. So on the virtual internship side, the students are not able to travel. So they are stuck in Singapore. And the companies that they are interning, they are in China. So of all the 6 elements that I have actually mentioned, one of the elements actually is already the non-issue. The livelihood issue is not a non-issue because they are not traveling. But in actual fact, the livelihood issue is a very important part of a student's overseas experience. But unfortunately for internships, virtual internship, we have to put that aside and really focus on how can we meet the other 5 elements. This is something that we always has been working on. In many areas, there are challenges that we have faced, including most of the interns, when they go to China to intern, they are given works that might need them to face customer or face vendors or face partners. But in China, if this is a virtual internship, all this face-to-face communication might be very limited to them because they are not in the same local situation. So in the case, they might not be able to handle those jobs. So when we talk to many of companies who are getting them on board for virtual internship, they tend to go towards things like social media work, or even programming work, things that does not allow them or does not need them to face customer, partners, vendors. So the scope of work that this virtual internship allows the students to do might be actually limited in those aspects. So we are addressing this. We felt that it's a good start, and we want to continue to build up more portfolio of works that the virtual internship students can do, and encourage more companies to accept them for a bigger variety of work to do. The other areas like enlarging personal and professional network. This is whereby what we do is that we have a big group of Singapore who has been in China for many years but have returned back to Singapore. And that is a big resources that we want to tap on, because the students in Singapore are not able to travel, but there's a lot of experts who have been in China for many years and they have returned to Singapore. They can serve as a very good resource the student can tap on to be able to enlarge their personal and professional network. So rather than to meet them in China, they can actually meet them in Singapore to do that. So again, many of these other aspects, the 5 aspects that I put here, we are going to try and test out, how effective are all these alternative ways of addressing these students not able to go overseas. And we are still testing. We are working closely with the university. We are working closely with the host company in China. We are working with the local Singapore community who can become the mentor and experts that they can serve. And all these things come together, so it creates a bigger community of people to support this VIP, the virtual internship program that I have. So I just want to put this issue to everybody to say that we are still work in progress. And I hope that this session we could actually discuss more and to get more ideas from our audience about how can we do better.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So that's the end of the presentation. So let's take a look at the Q&A. I think we're having some technical difficulties. Some of the questions have been shifted to the answered box. If you look at the answered box, you can see some of them. So I know that Carl has answered one of the questions, but let's take a look at those 2 that has been upvoted the most. Both of them are by Mr. Jamwat Singh. So the panelists, you can take a look at the Q&A boxes. You can see the questions. Let's start with the one on the top, right? Mr. Singh says that I'm not getting fundamental insights on how do we make virtual learning experiential. Indeed, right? So far, most practitioners have just digitalized traditional content into online platform rather than facilitating digital transformation. That's a good question because I think this COVID-19 situation is too novel for us and we're still experimenting. I think one of the, assumptions that are holding us back is thinking that online learning is just a replication of traditional learning content onto a digital platform. But because there are so many different tools that we can use, online learning could very well enhance and make traditional learning even better. So I'm thinking, at least in the areas of experiential learning, do the speakers have any thoughts on how digital transformation can actually possibly make experiential learning better than experiential learning itself? What do you think?
Let me try and take a stab at the question.
Prof. Yaacob? Yeah.
I think the jury's still out there. It's very difficult for us to make an assessment as to whether or not online experiences can really replicate 100% the experiential learning. I don't devalue online opportunities. I think they have provided a lot of opportunities for our students to learn. I give the example of my health and social sciences cluster where they actually use AR and VR for our students to understand better the equipment. There was even one AR, VR, I thought was fantastic, where they go through a virtual exercise to look at the patient's joints, and it was then transformed into an image for the students to understand. So I think we cannot diminish the value of that. The jury is still out as whether that is 100% adequate. But I think it's better than nothing given the COVID situation at the moment. So I'm still looking for some innovation. I don't quite agree with his point that we're just merely digitizing. I think that's not quite right. To be fair to the universities, including SIT, we have been exploring ways. Clearly, in some cases, we can just go online. That's quite straightforward. But in some other instances where you need to be able to interact, I think AR, VR still offers the best opportunity at the moment. At the end of the day, I think it's how it is being used and how do the instructors use those technology in a meaningful way, right? And I think so far, based on what I've seen from my own experience in SIT, shared by my colleagues, I have to be candid, I didn't see it personally, is that it has been helpful for our students. If not, they'll be doing nothing, you know, so they were learning something basically. So I'm in favor of continuing to push this and see whether or not some other innovation will emerge. I think we cannot ignore that basically. And the best is really for the practitioners on the ground, all our lecturers who are working on it, they can tell us the value. But having said that, and I'll be the first to say that nothing can beat face-to-face interaction. Just like this Zoom session, right? In a physical session, I can see Chihan's eyes, his body language, you know, which question he favors and all that. Now I can't, because he hides the screen, I can't see that. So that's the reality of the digital platform. There are some things that are missing, the nuances and so on and so forth. So even for our students in the health and social science cluster, when they go through the exercise which is virtual and they hear the sounds of the patient, those are not the real sounds. So let's be honest about it, right? Unless you are by the bedside, you touch the person's arms, and you ask whether it's painful or not, and the person reacts. That's how they pick up that understanding of what is going on with the patient. Can the machine will ever do that? I do not know. I mean, I am a firm believer of technology. I think one day it will. But for the moment, I think we see it just as a supplement, not a replacement. But I think it's a good start, and I think we should continue to pursue that. So that's my take on that question. Thank you.
Any other speakers would like to address the question? Carl?
Yeah, yes, I thank you, Jakob. I too agree with what was said there. And also, I was just thinking, you know, back to the life cycle of my friend Opistorchis vivarini, sensu lato, the liver fluke. What kinds of aspects of that learning cycle are actually relevant to the virtual learning? And I think the most important probably would be in terms of experimentation and also kind of reflective observational work on what's already been done and what's out there online. So you can use simulation models. You can use animation. And some of my students are actually brilliant at this, and they really are very skilled. They can actually work on this. And sometimes animations and simulations can help to really lead to deeper reflexive learning. And it can be experientially based, because a lot of the materials will be stuff that relates to real research, real problems, real issues. But I do agree with what Jakob was saying about the, you know, the kind of there's an aspect of our experiential which is very hard to actually replicate in all of these digitized and digital areas, and that is concrete experience. And it's a kind of experiential material that you know, Yuan Li was talking about, the kind of ways in which you know, you just some things you just cannot replicate. I cannot replicate bringing students to you know, to a flood pulse area and them all wading in the river. It just wouldn't quite be the same wading in the Singapore River as wading in the Tonle Sap, right? But you know, you could try to replicate certain things. Similarly, you know, when you have homestays with villages, or you just can't really replicate that feeling, those senses, you know. And so I think what we have here with COVID-19 is a challenging period where we have to try to think of ways in which we can excite the mind, the spirit and the emotions of people through various digital means, whatever we can use. And I think this would be very, very, this is something that I think is exciting. And and during this terrible period of the pandemic is something that we're, in a sense, everyone is forced to do to a degree. Okay, so I would like to go on and on, but I think I'll let other people have some say in this. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Carl. Anyone would like to address the question as well? I think the general question is, what are some of the learning strategies that will help us turn experiential learning into online versions? So far, from what I've seen in VR and AR, because of the limitations of technology, so what VR and AR can offer is mostly just a sight and sound replication, right? But yeah, the physical world, the social world is much more than that, right? So for instance, I can see how experiential learning of the physical environment could be encoded in a virtual manner. For instance, if you study the rock sediments of geography, well, of course, it would be great to go over there to the place and dig up the soil and actually touch and feel them. Yeah, but what virtual reality can do is not only to turn the sensation of touch of those sediments into something that's virtual and audio, but it can possibly even enhance it, right, through illustrations to animation. Right, so it seems that so far virtual replication of experiential learning tends to focus more on the learning of the physical dimension of the situation, right? Because this thing called context, right? So just now Jakob mentioned the social context, Enghan also mentioned that, right? Livelihood. I think this is the most difficult to replicate because in the first place, if you try to Google for the definition of context, you'll see that it's replaced by another word that's equally intangible. Right? They call it circumstances or situation. But what is that? If we can't define it clearly, we can't even encode it. How are we supposed to turn it virtual? I think this is still a work in progress. Right? I'm not sure how soon in the future we're able to do that. Right? I'm looking at the other questions. This is something that's quite related as well. Gerald Wong asked this question. The challenge we need to tackle as a community is what constitutes an online concrete experience. Right, I would like to direct this question to Yuan Li because I think amongst all of us, the kind of experience that she seeks to let students encounter is probably the most concrete.
Well, when I was kind of thinking a little bit about that previous thing about the online learning part, right? And in some ways, what as you guys were explaining your circumstances and your situation, and what you've been going through in the circuit breaker, has almost been the opposite of what I have been doing, and maybe so I have been inundated with experiences, but I've been socially isolated, right? So I'm living here, out, in front, there's the bayou out in front, and there's fish in the bayou and all of that. So there's all these opportunities for concrete experience, but there's no human interaction or no opportunities for learning. But so it's kind of like it's been kind of like a bit of between my partner and I, it's been a little bit about the joke. A little running joke, like, oh, let's go and catch frogs. Maybe, we can go and catch frogs. So one night we decided to go out and catch frogs because it was, the moon was shining and it was, great frogging. And then we're like, okay, so we caught we caught a couple. How do we catch frogs? Okay, let's go and YouTube it. So we looked in YouTube, how do you catch frogs? Then you got these frogs that are like this big. Now, how do you skin them? And then how do you cook them, right? So basically, we kind of worked it out from YouTube. So we kind of done the flip side. So we've got plenty of experience, but we don't have the knowledge, right? We don't have the learning. We don't have, normally you'd go to, find some guy, the old fisherman in the village to teach you, right? But because there's no social interaction, we're kind of doing it the other way around. We're doing the knowledge part virtually and then the experience part, experientially. So maybe it's a little bit of, I'm just offering that, not everyone in the world has it the other way around, where we're doing our learning virtually or we need to do our, hang on, wait a minute, that they are cut off from experience, but overstimulated by learning, you know. So it's just, you know, I think when we talk about this online and the whole thing about this online platform, I mean, I'm here in the United States, it's, you know, 2 a.m. and we can connect up. The level of connectivity that we have is tremendous, right? That's another feature that we have to address. So it's you know, the range of contexts that people are in is different. You know, I'm not giving you any answer. I'm just making the question more complicated so I don't have to answer specifically.
Enghan, do you have anything to say about that? Yeah, you mentioned that, you know, livelihood is really hard to access in a virtual online platform.
Yes. Again, I mean, again, when we look at livelihood, we realize that you know, to do like for my context, to do a 6 months to 1 year internship actually is very costly, and so it's not possible then. But again, if a livelihood thing can probably be addressed through a shorter tour where they get to squeeze all the livelihood experience within a shorter period of time, maybe a 1 week or 2 week, you know. So again, we try to maximize the effect using the minimum amount of time and effort from us. So again, all these components are maybe missing because of funding, because of pandemic. But again, I think, you know, we try to look into different ways to mitigate this problem. Example, we might actually create a kind of simulation for students to look at how is it like to live in China where you don't spend any cash or coins, you know, where everything is done through your cell phone. So we try to look into all this potential where in Singapore, everything you do is just through your cell phone and through a platform that you pay for on the cell phone. So these are things that we do in China every single day. I haven't used a coin or a note for the last 1 year or so. So again, these are things that we cannot replicate. So again, we try to look into different ways on getting the same experience in a foreign land, in Singapore, in this case.
All right. Let's look at the other questions and see whether there are some that are much more popular. Right. There's one that says, what are some of the ways of measuring acquisition of soft skills like emotional awareness, mindset change, and communication skills? Well, I think this question is not only applicable to virtual experiential learning, but even all sorts of learning that seeks to help students acquire soft skills, right? So I think we can take a look at other questions. Measurement, all right, I suppose if you, this question read large, a general question would be, how do we measure the success of virtual experiential learning compared to experiential learning? Right. Do you have any ideas, or have you even come up with a framework to deal with this?
I'd just like to go back to the earlier question on soft skills. Can I?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. You know, this was brought up by my students, you know, very good Singaporean students, a few exchange students who go overseas for a long period of time. And they often say that the big take home for them is their development of their confidence, and also the development of their ability to communicate across cultures, and to also know the skills of trying to work in unfamiliar environments. Okay, now I think experiential learning is absolutely critical for the development of very important soft skills, and I think employers in Singapore would recognize people who have these soft skills. And so I actually often think that soft skills are very underrated, undervalued, because very often people are looking for the hard concrete skills, you know, the techniques. What techniques have you learned? What devices, what applications can you do, and things like this. But the soft skills are innate. You know, they are part of human interaction, and I actually think that experiential processes are extremely important in the development of soft skills. Now, of course, we can try our best to use material that we have to develop soft skills, what I would call in situ, by you know, creating situations here in Singapore. And I think you can do that, but it's a lot of effort, and you have to really think through many steps to be able to do that effectively. So just to say thank you for that question on soft skills, because I think it's really, really, really important. By the way, just on a personal note, I was hopeless at these soft skills before I started to this crazy idea of doing field-based learning. And it actually made me a much more sociable person. Okay, thank you.
Ching Han, can
Can
I
I
just...
start by answering that?
Yuan Li? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So thanks, Carl, because what you brought up about this whole soft skill and the whole measuring business, the measure, you know, how do we measure it? I think that goes back to the whole thing about the know what and the know how, right? Know what and know how can definitely be measured. So you can measure that competency really well. You know, they either know how to build a wall or they don't. Either they know how to catch a frog or they don't, or, you know, or do a surgery or they don't, right? But there's a next level, and the next level is the know why. And I think it's not true to say that you can't measure that, because everyone who knows why, you know when you have it. You know it in here. It may not be measurable, it may be very difficult to articulate, but you absolutely know when you have your why. And you absolutely are lost. Your spirit is utterly lost when you don't have your why. So you know when you don't have it. And you know, and ultimately it's a very personal question, right? Ultimately it's a very, does it make sense to you? Does it fit into, does it give you that inner core that you need to, you know, to survive challenges, to you know, to set your life in a particular direction. So I think, you know, it may not be something that is easily tangible, easily described by other people, and certainly very difficult to be described by other people, but certainly every one of us who has talked to a student, counseled someone, we know when they feel it when they have their why, right? So that's my 2 cents.
Jacob?
Yeah, Ching Han, I just want to take a step on the question of assessment, a typically Singaporean question, you know, how do you assess everything in life, basically? I think we have to be very careful and understand what is the purpose of AR and VR in relation to the whole continuum. It can never replace the actual learning that you get in a classroom, you get interaction with a professor or your colleague, but it is an important tool, right? It is being used in many fields. The police, for example, use it to train their police officers, right? So that they are familiar with different situations and so on and so forth. I don't know how they assess it after that, but I don't think they'll say, you've done the virtual test, therefore you can be a police officer. I doubt it very much, basically, right? What I'm familiar, for example, in the building industry, we have a lot of AR, VR tools which are available for you to look at a building before it's being built. So you can see where the staircase is, where the light is, you know, but nothing beats seeing the real thing. And you see whether or not this is the building that you wanted or not, basically, you know. So to a large extent, I think you must know what is it meant for. I think the AR and VR is really just a supplement to help you for the real part of the work, basically, right? To really assess based on that, I think it's going to be very difficult. Online assessment for online classes is a different matter altogether. We do that all the time, right? I mean, when all our school kids went to home-based learning, they have to be assessed based on what they do in terms of submitting their homework online, all that. That's a different matter. But for virtual experiential experience, I think it's going to be very difficult for us to come up with a metric. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the students themselves to see whether they feel confident. So in the case of our students at the Health and Social Sciences cluster, that is just a way to prepare them for the real world, right? And we don't assess based on how well they are prepared in their virtual classroom. You see, they see all the machinery, how it works. When they go out for the clinical placement, that's where we can really make an assessment. So I think we have to see this in that context rather than saying, I need to assess before I can. I don't think it worked that way, basically. I think it's very important. Finally, of course, before we end, I think the only solution to all of this virtual experience that we're going through is actually to find a vaccine for COVID. Once we have a vaccine, we have solved all the problems. We don't need to go. But you know, at the end of the day, I think we are in this situation where we don't have a vaccine and we have to use the virtual experience as much as possible. But it is a supplement. I don't think it's a replacement.
All right. Thanks, Jacob. I'm looking at this question further down the Q&A, and I thought this is something that is very relevant to what we're discussing today. Well, this question is asked by Lois Sir. The question is, what are the key transferable skills, knowledge, and attitudes that help facilitation of virtual experiences? Right. So I think this is a pretty precise question. But I guess the assumption is that the sort of skills that are transferred through virtual learning is somewhat different from unmediated ones, right? So in your experience, do you see there's any difference between the type of skills that are being transferred through different platforms? All right, I think Enghan would be able to answer this question, I assume, because you have run virtual internships and the traditional internships. Do you assess the skills differently? Do you define the skills differently in these two different modalities?
Yes. Look, again, is that the context is that I personally view the virtual internship or the internship in China as more of a cultural, experiential, soft skill related kind of experience rather than hard skills. I felt the students, when they go to China, the hard skills itself is secondary. The soft skills, understanding of the supervisor's instruction, be able to understand Chinese, and look at all the different kind of situational instructions and be able to navigate through the politics of the company. These are things that they need to do. So unfortunately, it is not really, I say that it can be done on a virtual basis. There can be a virtual internship where all these things still can be imparted, but it will be indirect and it will be more exchange experience between the person and the intern. So the effect would, the so-called the results, efficacy will be lower than the real experience the person will be there. So I thought to answer your question is that it can still be done virtually, but the results will not be as apparent. You might need a few rounds of so-called instructions or experience or contact to get the kind of effect as what I would like it to be on directly.
Other speakers, do you think there are different types of skills that are transmitted through virtual platforms?
May I come in?
Yes.
Okay. Well, yes. I mean, transdisciplinary learning is a great arena for not just experiential aspects, but also digital aspects. And so I was able, for instance, to, you can share across very different disciplines. So, if you're in the humanities, you can learn a lot about what it means to be a liver surgeon. You can learn a lot about what it means to, deal in the sort of a medical arena from different specialists. And that's what we did, so, and you can do that virtually. You don't actually have to always take groups of people into the field. I mean, there's a different way in which that comes into play and can be very effective. But I think in transdisciplinary inquiry-centered learning, when you have specific problems, there's a lot that you can do. And I think probably people are doing this more now through, video conferencing, through Zoom, which we're using now, to really get a more solid transdisciplinary communication. Because very often different disciplines talk in different languages. It's not like the same as you know, the foreign language, but it is almost like a foreign language. So a parasitologist talking to a sociologist can be quite interesting, okay? And new insights can emerge. So I actually think we can use, the technologies we have to further certain ways of thinking about problems. But of course, the actual deep experiential part, which involves all the senses, and it involves so many other things beside just understanding a problem better, then that is, you know, that let's just hope that, as Jakob said, we get the vaccines. Okay.
Yeah. Can I just add to that? I think one of the key value, which is transferable to anybody doing experiential learning virtually, is perspective. In a way that sometimes is very difficult to even you get it in real life. I give you an example. It may be a mundane example, but I don't know how many of you are soccer fans, but if you already remember 2010 World Cup in South Africa, was the first time when they used a camera vertically across the field, both horizontally and across the length and breadth, and it shows us a totally different perspective of how the game is being played. So for example, I understand that from sports perspective, when you look at the thing in a 360 way, you look at it very differently, basically, right? So I think that is one thing that I see value in that. So I go back to my earlier example of even the thing that you do for buildings, because the buildings, when you can rotate it 360 and you look at it from a different perspective, something that you can never see until you build the building, and then you realize it's this way. So I think a different sense of perspective of the problem is actually an interesting transferable skill when you actually can do this through experiential learning virtually, basically. That's my sense of it all.
I think one of the skills that we could acquire through virtualization of experiential learning is observation skills. In fact, some of the speakers, I think it was Carl and Enghan who mentioned that a virtual version of experiential learning could be used as a pre-trip training, right? So one of the skills that is emphasized on in field trips is students being able to make observations. That there's a possibility of using videos, 360 videos or virtual reality videos to prepare students to first at least warm up their readiness to make observations in the field before they go to the field, right? I think this is one of the uses of virtual experiential learning, right? It might not be able to replicate the real thing, but at least if we were to define the object of experience more specifically, right, then we could at least try to replicate it as much as possible by reducing some of the complexities in the form of a video, right? So I think perhaps even for Yuan Li, maybe a pre-trip training in safety regulations, right, could be done through a virtual means, right? For Carl, maybe something enhanced virtual reality could help students better appreciate the ecosystem much better than having to spend weeks walking around, because there are certain things that our human senses can't perceive, right? That's why we have literature that can help us imagine an alternative reality. I think what virtual reality can do is that it enriches the ways in which students can possibly imagine what reality could be. I think this is specifically relevant for understanding context, right? Because if we don't spend enough time in the field, as Carl would attest to, sometimes we end up misunderstanding what the other societies, the people in other societies actually feel about their own reality. What virtual reality can do is it helps us construct that reality, right? Enhance it even before students take the trip, right? So I think we're running out of time. We still have many questions out there. But what we're going to do is we're going to keep a copy of these questions, and we're going to use them. I'm going to use them to frame our discussion topic for our next experiential learning conference. Right. I hope that everyone will still turn up for our next conference. Hopefully, I think hopefully the vaccine would have been found and we can finally meet one another, right, physically, right? And I'll reframe the questions, the topic for discussion, so that all the questions that have been asked that we can't answer during this short time can be addressed again, right? Thank you very much. Any last comments from our speakers?
Offer a quick one.
Yeah.
You know, I think the digital platform, to me, the digital platform is amazing. You know, the internet offers us this amazing array of, you know, we have access to this huge, vast body of knowledge that we couldn't have before. You know, when I actually went to the library and did the Dewey Decimal System and looked for books through, you know, through those card things, right? And the amount of information I have on this little thing here, you know, it's just amazing. And so really the whole digital experience is about that huge breadth of experience that we can get. And I think to, you know, to use a digital platform to replace experience may not be the best use of the functions of that platform, but it's to broaden that experience and to use the breadth of it in its full breadth, rather than as a replacement, right? I think we're in our reaction to the pandemic has like, how can we replace things? Yeah. But now we have to look beyond replacing and how do we really enhance?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If I can just add, I think it's an important point for us not to forget context, as mentioned by Chihan. We are in Singapore, and the push towards digitalization is picking up momentum and speed. So Singapore itself will change, and how companies operate will change, and how groups operate will change. So I think the idea of using technology should become almost second nature to all of us as teachers, as facilitators. The question, as rightly pointed out by all our panelists, is that how do we then use it of value to our students' experience? I think it's not a replacement, but it can add, and all the points raised by my other esteemed colleagues are actually very good points about how we can give perspective, context, training, and so on and so forth. So I'm making a pitch for Singapore's effort to digitalize because I'm part of it. And I think it's something which we as institutions will also have to adapt and learn, because I think it is for, you know, our sort of workforce of the future and how they can operate in such an environment, especially when we come across another pandemic, because we're hoping that our students one day can also come up with new solutions and innovative solutions to deal with this. And because life must continue as far as possible, and I hope you know, our students will understand that this is a journey that we cannot turn back, but as facilitators we have to help them and move forward. So thank you, Chihan, for inviting. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you in person next year. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you. Right. So thank you all attendees for hanging out with us for the past 1.5 hours. We hope that you join us again next year, hopefully, right, for the physical conference, right, during which we will try to address all the questions you have asked here. We've already saved a copy of this, so rest assured that we'll look through them carefully. Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye, and have a good day and night, morning. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.